How you guys doing? Thanks for coming out. First off, I'm not part of the 1%. I just got off of my corporate job. I assure you, I'm very uncomfortable. Okay, I'm going to read two selections from a very distant supporting character from the novel, which won't give you very much light on the story itself, but she's certainly one of my favorite characters. Her name is Ray. She's a therapist, and this is her speaking to her therapist. But I would like to return, if you don't mind, to the idea of pain, and my own pain in particular. It wasn't what you might expect. There weren't any singular traumas in my life that I could recall, no abusive relatives, no dead loved ones in need of some sort of graveside reconciliation or anything like that. I guess you could just say that I felt empty, oppressively, suffocatingly empty, and there was just nothing I could do to fill the void. I once had a dream, and this couldn't have been very many years ago, that I was trapped in the freight trailer of an 18-wheeler. I was sitting down, I think, with my back against the wall, and this truck was just barreling down the road at a terrible speed, and the screws and the bolts holding it together seemed to be rattling loose from all the jarring and the shaking, and I was completely powerless to stop it or slow it down in any way. But I wasn't alone. There were others in there with me, some sitting passively on the floor, some standing and watching the walls, and some just lying on their backs with their eyes open and their face totally calm, like it was just so normal to them. So routine, and it was getting stuffy in that little space since we were all sucking up all the oxygen, and I began to hyperventilate. But no one else even seemed to notice. They were all perfectly at ease, perfectly calm, no matter how heavy the air got, no matter how violently the walls shook. I tried asking them where we were going. I tried telling them it was a rocky road we were on, a narrow little back road in the country probably, not meant for heavy vehicles. But my voice, I could hardly breathe, much less speak. And they just sat there, or stood watching the wall, some of them so comfortable they looked to be pleased with themselves, amused, and the air just kept shrinking away, and the walls shook harder and harder, and the whole truck just thundered down that strange gravel road, past God knows what, trees, cattle, going faster by the second, faster and faster, and farther from some place of origin that I couldn't remember, but that I'd longed, nonetheless, to return to. It went faster and faster, like it was never going to stop for anyone, me especially. Well, the reason I remember a dream like that so vividly is because the feeling I had when I woke up, the panic, the helplessness, just the sickness of knowing I was straying forever into the wilds of some lost country and wouldn't probably get back. That feeling was just a magnified version of what I'd been feeling already for a number of years. And that's where the emptiness came in. It was like I could see the spirit draining out of me as if through a bottomless cavity in my heart. Like I had come to realize far too late in my life that the fire in my eyes, the one I'd shared with my girlhood friends, it was extinguished. Or near extinguished anyway. I was at the time in my early 30s, and I had already become a passenger on that freight trailer, oblivious, resigned, utterly complicit in my own destruction. And I'm going to read one more, and this is actually an email sent to that same therapist from the same therapist. After her therapy had concluded. I read a story once when I was a bit younger about a wealthy young man, or perhaps he was a prince, who walked through the poor district of town every day on his way to the market. I can't for the life of me recall the name of the story, but it has stayed with me, and I think of it often. The man, who was very handsome, very charming, was admired and envied by all the commoners who watched him pass every day. He never strayed far from their minds or their conversations, but then there came a day when he didn't pass, and then another, and eventually the citizens learned that the man had taken his own life, and that's how the story ended. Just like that, with no explanation of how the man lived or even what was troubling him. You just knew that he had chosen death over a life of splendor and prosperity, while the peasants living in their poverty, their filth, had chosen life. God, if I could only remember the name of that wonderful story. But name or no name, the story remains, and I suspect it will continue to form an essential part of the framework through which I see the world. Which brings me to another story I wanted to talk to you about, a similar one pulled from the pages of my own life, my own work at the clinic. There was this woman, well advanced in her years, who, strangely enough, had come to live in Boston from the backlands of Georgia. From the swamps, I think she told me, down along the Florida border. Her name was Mrs. Gail Parker, and she was one of the first patients I ever counseled. You can probably imagine my confusion, my shock, when I called her one day to ask why she had missed our third appointment, and instead of her feeble little voice I had heard a man on the other end, an Officer McSomething from the county sheriff's department, asking me if I had known her, and he actually used those words, "Did you know her?" like it was already old news that she was dead. Suicide, he told me, but that much anyone could have guessed. Mrs. Gale was a quiet woman, but she answered a question truthfully when you asked her. She was suicidal, and she made no bones about it. In the first 5 minutes of our first appointment, she told me she had lost just about everyone she'd ever known, and even a few she hadn't hardly known at all, and she figured it was her time to move on as well. She said there wasn't any use in me trying to talk her out of it, and when I tried anyway, she said that I was the reason she was going to kill herself. People like me. In her own words, there's this whole new world of young folks what don't care for the save old folks. And if that say don't hold no sort of weight, then what use is there in me saying a thing at all? I remember that because it struck me as a prepared remark, like she had said it before, maybe more than once. She wasn't seeing me to be talked out of her decision, she said. She was seeing me so that she could do the talking. I owed her that much at least. So after that I just shut up. For all of her plain speaking, there was a lot of mystery to her, a lot that was hard to read. You see, she wore this smile, Mrs. Gail Parker, even when confessing her sorrow. A nervous, kind of fidgety smile, with white teeth that weren't really hers. And the smile itself was artificial too, and you always got the idea that something was hidden away behind it. Something she refused to reveal. Maybe not a fact or a detail or anything concrete like that, but rather a sentiment, a secret emotion which she chose to hold on to keep from me. I remember it so clearly. She had fallen into an absolute existential crisis, and though you might figure someone like that would turn an uncaring eye to the superficial concerns of society, the way they look, for instance, or the way they carry themselves or speak, she was still such a lady, still so modest, embarrassed to speak of such things. She would turn away from me when talking sometimes, her face a hot shamed red or a pale alabaster. She would laugh hysterically, would giggle, looking down at her toes, despite my seriousness, my insistence that she give full expression to her feelings. Sometimes she would try to play it all off, like she was really just joking or exaggerating, mocking things up for effect, like she didn't really mean it. But that was only her public showing, almost certainly not the way she was in private. Well, the officer practically had to hang up on me for all the questions I had for him. It turns out that when they opened the garage door and found her at peace in the old running station wagon, her body, slumped over the panel of the pulpit, slipped over the console, was garbed in this beautiful pleated dress, and she had spent hours making herself up. Her cheeks were blushed and powdered, and she'd done her nails and eyelids and lashes, and she'd even gone through the trouble of doing her hair up in a bouffant, like in the 60s. And her mouth. The officer said he couldn't really describe it. Sort of a smile, he said. But forced. I don't know. Like maybe she wanted to make a different sort of face, but smiled instead. And in my mind, I saw that smile with perfect clarity, because I had seen it before. And I thought about it then, and I think about it still today. The last breath we all take will be out from what I hear, and I don't suspect it'll be a sound anyone's prepared to listen to. But I get the feeling sometimes that Mrs. Gail Parker's last breath was held behind that smile and never released. An inhalation. Like locking away the stirrings of the deep, lest they make waves on the surface. A deep which was, to her, of lesser value, and in no way truer, more essential. A few considerations. Ray. Thank you.